Let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way right off the bat. Yes, this book is a step down from A Storm of Swords. No, this book is nowhere near as bad as everyone says it is. So anyway, here we are, A Feast for Crows. And as usual with a series like this, once I get so far into the series, I just kind of go full on gangbusters on spoilers. So go ahead and consider this your spoiler warning for the video. If you for some reason haven't read A Feast for Crows, first off, I don't know why you're here this far into a series watching a video. Go read it. It's good. And then come back after the fact, because I'm pretty much going to spoil the shit out of especially the ending. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take some time here to talk about the structure of this book and the way it was split from the next book. And I thought it would be just a little quick bit here, but then when I started putting my notes together, I had a lot more to say about it than I thought I did. But I also genuinely think it's actually an extremely important topic to discuss in a review of the book because it's so integral to the structure and the story that's being told to you and how the story is being told to you and how it is similar to and or varies from the books that you've read thus far. So George is on record as saying that when he was writing this book, it just got so big that it ended up like 2,000 pages and it was going to have to be cut in half. And he had a decision to make at this point. Do I cut it in half and tell half the story for all of the characters, or do I tell all of the story for half of the characters? Which is, of course, the one that he went with. So he decided to split it up and tell King's Landing's story here, and then in the next book tell Daenerys' story and the story of what's happening up at the wall, so he could tell all of the story for some of the characters. And as much as that sounds like a good idea, and I can see exactly why he decided to do what he did and how that could cause intrigue for some people and how some people as a reader might enjoy that more than the other way around. Having said that, I personally believe that it was actually the wrong decision. And I think it was the wrong decision for me personally as a reader. My tastes in this series and just reading in general, I think this was the weaker of the two decisions that he could have made. But then again, at the end of the day, I actually think it was just the wrong decision for the series as a whole. I think if he had done it the other way, it would have just worked better. The other way would have played to the strengths of this series in a way that this split just did not. By that I mean, one of the huge main strengths of A Song of Ice and Fire is you get this really tense, nail-biting political drama mixed with the weird and the magical and the occult and the mysterious. You'll have a chapter in King's Landing with some kings and queens and some politics that are doing crazy shit. I mean, you're on the edge of your seat watching this happen. Then the very next chapter, you'll have some mysterious zombie undead creature up north of the wall with its white skin and its black fingers and dissolving into mist, and these, witches bringing people back from the dead and dragons being born out of eggs over here. And then you snap back to the political drama at King's Landing just to go back over here and get something else creepy, maybe even like chapters that lean into like straight on horror. And just the way that you are able to step through from one to the next, and they are intermixed and woven together is easily, for me, one of, if not the biggest strength of the entire series of A Song of Ice and Fire. So what happens if you take all of the horror and the mystery and all of the supernatural aspects of the Walking Dead and the White Walkers or whatever they're called in this book and the dragons and all of that and strip it out of the book so we can take one that focuses simply on political drama? What do we have left? Well, that would be a book nobody wants to read. And of course, I'm being hyperbolic when I say that, but really, I think that's why people get so genuinely upset and just vomit hate at this book online. And like I said at the beginning, this book is way better than people give it credit for online. It is so tightly written. It is just as well written as any other book in the series has been so far. I don't necessarily think that it's better written than the other books in the series. I have seen that argument used online in defenders of this book. I don't see that argument at all. I think it's just on par with everything else. And then there is actually one plot thread that actually benefits from the way that these two books were split in half. That being Tyrion not being a part of this book, because Tyrion just killed his father in King's Landing, and all of King's Landing is now up in arms and in this uproar, and they're out there looking for him, and it's like this mystery of where did he go? What happened to him? We need to find him. I want his head, bring it back. And the fact that his chapters are missing from this book just adds so much to that side of it, because you don't know where he is. You don't know what he's doing. You don't know what kind of fuckery he's getting up to right now, because let me tell you, that Tyrion's a sneaky little bastard, and he's always up to something. So that thread actually greatly benefited from his chapters being missing. But that is the one and only thing in this book that benefited from it being split in the way that it was split. And I just don't think that that is enough to justify the split. Now I have to jump back real quick to just how well written this book is. And also going to reference one of my older videos. I think it was in A Clash of Kings. I said that you have a certain level of investment in all of your characters, and sometimes you flip a page and you see the name at the top of a chapter and you just go, oh man, I don't like Sansa, or I don't like whoever it may be that's lower on your list of interested characters. But then once you start reading that chapter, you just get so drawn in and so invested and so like wrapped up in what's happening, because it doesn't matter if it's from a chapter of a character that you're not interested in. The book itself and the comings and goings of what's happening at any given time is so damn interesting, you can't help but get invested in it. Now, this book feels like a series of chapters, all of them of exactly that feeling. Every time you turn the page, you're like, Jesus Christ, I just had a chapter of Cersei like literally 2 chapters ago. Why are we doing this again? So it's that feeling over and over and over again. And you just have to keep reminding yourself, no, just keep going, because the second I get about a half a page into this, I'm going to be locked in and I'm going to be fully on board and fully invested in what's happening. But then what that does is certain books that have a magnetic pull to them, once you get going, you just are ripped through that book. You cannot stop turning pages. You are so invested in what's happening. It's just, you almost don't even want to put the book down. But that's not this book. Every time you hit a chapter, you have a bit of a mini stop, and it's just like it takes that forward momentum and makes it feel a little stuttered in this book. And that's unfortunate, because the book is written so well and the story's genuinely engaging all the way throughout. It's just that the format that it is written in actively works against your investment and your involvement in the story, or at least it did mine. Because let's be real, with all that bitching and pissing and moaning aside, the world building alone that you're going to get in this book is worth reading it in and of itself, just for that, because his world building is just so good. It is some really next level stuff as far as I'm concerned. And then the other thing that people really like to bitch about are the one-off chapters of random characters that aren't normal POV characters, and they just kind of random characters that get one chapter and then we move on. I thought those were really well done, and I thought that they were 100% necessary in order to tell the story that needed to be told. That is one argument that I just don't understand, is when people start bitching about those one-off chapters, because really, we'd have massive holes in our plot and our story if we didn't have them. He kind of had no choice but to throw those in there. And then I know this is really like kind of an aside and has nothing to do with anything, but the titles of those one-off chapters I thought were just magical. They were really, really good. And then on top of that, there was one of those one-off chapters that was actually an Arya chapter hidden behind a strange title, which was just wonderful. And it actually worked out perfectly for the storyline that was being told right then and there at that second in time, with her character and what she was going through at that point in time made sense. that the title chapters changed. Also, the same thing happens with Sansa. Sansa. She gets a whole switch to her title chapters. They take a new title name as well for a very particular reason. Then let's go ahead and talk about the characters like we always do, because the characters in these A Song of Ice and Fire books are just so well done. They are just absolutely amazing. In this book, we have, of course, our natural standout being Arya. Of course, at least for me, she's one of my favorites, period. So following her was wonderful. The only bad thing about that is we got like 3 fucking chapters for her, and that was about it. I was really sad at how stretched out her chapters were. But then Samwell ended up being a pretty big standout for me in this book, which was surprising because up until now, I found him pretty annoying as a character in general. So for him to be one of my standouts kind of surprised me. And of course, Jaime had to take probably the top spot, even over top of Arya, just because he got so much more to do, which even if you think about it, wasn't that much. He just kind of hung out in King's Landing and then went up to do some negotiating, and that was about it. But it's really more just his journey of learning honor and loyalty to people that aren't named Lannister. That and the deterioration of his relationship with his sister, because the more it goes on, the more he kind of sees just how different of people they really are. And then he starts to see more of her core and her other side. And then he even gets to the point where he thinks, I need to get close to Tommen before she does, so I can keep him from turning into whatever the fuck she turned Joffrey into. Like, he's actively like, I need to do stuff, get in between her and her goals, because she's ruining everything she touches. This then ends with the epic mic drop moment when he is away from King's Landing at the end of the book, and he gets this message that says your sister has been captured and imprisoned at King's Landing, and he's just like, fucking burn it. I was just like, damn, like, yeah, go Jaime. And then after all of that, you have somebody like Brienne, who was a very unfortunate character to follow in this book, because I personally really like Brienne, and I found her journey in this book to be kind of dull and probably the most uninteresting to follow. It's you kind of eyes would start to glaze over after a while in some of her chapters. I just wasn't as invested as I would have liked to have been. But all that being said, she got one of the better endings when she comes face to face with Lady Stoneheart. And I mean, that shit was awesome. And if you thought that Catelyn was one mean bitch when she was alive, you know, all cold and calculating and just really one tough lady, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because once she's seen her son killed before her very eyes and then had her own throat slit, and you bring her back from the dead as a zombie corpse skeleton thing, oh, look the fuck out. You just try to explain to her calmly and reasonably that, no, actually I did everything you said. I'm actually still on that mission that you asked me to go on, and Jaime's not actually that bad of a guy, and watch her fucking hang your ass for it. Yep. There you go. Like, why the fuck was Lady Stoneheart eliminated from the television show? I will never understand that. Like, who dropped that ball in the writer's room? That is an easy slam dunk. And they're just like, yeah, you know what? That completely badass plotline from the books, we don't need it. Get rid of it. What? Anyway, and then, of course, we have Arya, who is, like I said, one of my favorites, but we only got like the 3 chapters. And even then, I was completely torn as to what was going on with her. Like, I've been waiting so much for her to get to these faceless men and to get there. And then when she gets there, I'm so torn with what's happening and the way her character is proceeding and developing, which I'm supposed to be, I think. Just all of the things that they're making her do and making her give up. She has to throw away Needle, which is just, I mean, breaks your absolute heart, which of course she doesn't. She just kind of hides it instead. But then this thing of her not doing what they're telling her to do, not giving up her core as Arya, which then ends with, because she keeps clinging to this core of her being, which is Arya, she ends up being blinded by one of the faceless men as basically punishment for not letting go. Oh my God. And then that's how they leave you. It's just on that cliffhanger. You're like, fucking really? Actually, if we're going to talk about cliffhangers, every single POV character in this entire book's story ends on a cliffhanger. It's like Arya's blind. Cersei's in prison. Brienne's hanged. Samwell goes to the Maesters, and one of them immediately runs off to go catch Daenerys. And then Jaime's is kind of like the least cliffhangery because he just gets a letter from his sister and says, "F that bitch." But it's just wild how every single one of them stops on some wicked cliffhanger. And then that makes me understand why some people feel a certain way about this series, like really, really mad at the series because of the way that it just ended on all of these cliffhangers. And as far as I could tell, if the next book follows the same trajectory and keeps giving us these weird cliffhanger endings, and like say Jon's story in particular follows some of the same trajectories as his story does in the show, I could see where his cliffhanger might end. But then, like I said, if the next book just stops all like this one did on cliffhangers, I could see why certain people are mad at George R.R. Martin for not finishing this series because they've been waiting like 20 fucking years for the resolution of these cliffhangers and they're not getting them. And if you were, say, following this book series from like, the 90s through as the books came out at a relatively kind of regular clip, and then he just decided to stop on you on the cliffhangers, yeah, I can see why you'd be mad. I luckily have a different time that I've entered the story and a different perspective because I have the luxury of knowing what the trajectory of the story is. I have the luxury of knowing that he's not actively writing the story or not actively like pushing to get it out. I don't know. And I am very well aware that the next book might never even come, so I don't have that horrible like anger of "fuck you, George" that some people have over it, but I could see why some people do. Anyway, all of that aside, I actually don't think that the cliffhanger endings, like chapter after chapter after chapter, is a bad thing in this book. Actually, as a matter of fact, I would say that it's a good thing. A good thing in the sense that it was by far my favorite part of the book. The ending was really like a slingshot, almost like the way Gene Wolfe likes to describe his endings in a book, but it was just so engaging in the way you got one after another, after another, after another. That was by far the most exciting and engaging part of the entire book, and they were really, really good cliffhangers. Like, it's just like a knife in the gut every time you got one, which is actually, like I said, just so good. Great writing, great setup, great execution, great everything. It was so good, even if it was so painful because, now what's next, that kind of feeling. But anyway, like I said at the beginning of the video, as great as George R.R. Martin's world building is and his characters are and just that nail-biting political drama that you're going through in these stories, as great as all of that is, I really, truly, genuinely feel like that X factor, the real magic in his series, is the dynamic mix of the politics and the weird and the creepy and the horror and the strange and the magical, and the way those are weaved together is really what throws this all up to that next level that people get so excited about. And with that being missing from this book, because he took that weaving together and he kind of separated it out, I feel like I can't not knock it down at least a couple of points because of it. So I'm going to have to give this book, I'm going to drop it back down to an 8 out of 10. Not that that's a bad book, because that's still an extremely good book, an extremely good read, a good experience, all of that. It just has to go down. It just does. Anyway, everybody, as always, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.